My parents tried to steal my $500,000 inheritance until Grandpa's secret clause ruined their lives. Growing up, I learned early on that my world revolved around my younger sister, Stella. Not because I wanted it to, but because my parents, Michael and Sarah, made sure hers was the only one that truly mattered. I'm Scarlett, and I'm 30 years old, living in a quiet apartment in Portland, Oregon that I bought with money I earned myself, brick by painstaking brick. It's a life I built far away from the gravitational pull of their favoritism, but the emotional scars run deep. My 7th birthday was a quiet affair, a small store-bought cake, 7 candles, a mumbled wish. No balloons, no friends, just the 3 of us and the click of my dad's old camera. I remember forcing a smile, trying to act grateful. A year later, for Stella's 4th birthday, our backyard was transformed into a carnival. Bouncy castle, professional face painter, a woman dressed as a princess who actually sang birthday songs. There were 20 or 30 kids from the neighborhood, all laughing and running around. When I asked my mom, my voice small and confused, why I didn't get parties like that anymore, she just brushed it off. "You're older, Scarlett," she said with a dismissive chuckle. "You don't need all that fuss." But I was still a kid. I still dreamed of glitter and feeling special. As we got older, the pattern only intensified. Everything I wanted, I had to work for. Everything Stella wanted, she simply had to express a fleeting interest in. I saved allowance and babysitting money for over a year to buy a decent secondhand bicycle so I could get around town for my part-time jobs. The week I brought it home, Stella saw it, pouted, and the next day, my parents bought her a brand new, top-of-the-line model with all the bells and whistles. When I protested, Mom sighed and said, "Scarlett, you're the older sister. You need to be understanding." Understanding meant giving in. I learned to swallow the bitter pill of their unfairness, but it left a permanent, sharp edge inside me. In high school, I poured myself into academics and extracurriculars. I joined the debate team, volunteered at the library, took every AP class I could. I won state-level competitions, got elected to leadership positions. Each achievement felt like a quiet victory, a way to prove my worth. Maybe, just maybe, finally earn a flicker of real pride from my parents. But every time the reaction was muted. A brief nod, a casual good job. Meanwhile, Stella brought home a mediocre report card, and Dad took her out for ice cream to celebrate her effort. She decided she wanted to learn guitar, and Mom immediately bought her an expensive instrument and scheduled private lessons. I wanted to take a summer course at the local community college to get ahead, and they told me to save up from my cafe job. I stopped trying to compete with Stella. It wasn't her fault she was the golden child, wrapped in a protective, privileged bubble. My struggle wasn't with her, it was with the people who controlled the narrative, who constantly positioned me as the capable, independent one who needed nothing, while Stella was the fragile flower who needed everything. I worked, I saved. I earned a full scholarship to Ashwood University, a rigorous out-of-state school I dreamed of attending. I brought the acceptance letter home, heart pounding, hoping for genuine excitement. Mom glanced at it, frowned, and said, "Ashwood? That's so far. And it sounds hard. Are you sure you can handle it?" She then immediately changed the subject to Stella's plans for senior year, which involved no demanding academic goals, just vague ideas about art classes. I stood there, the letter in my hand, feeling the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just the lack of celebration. It was the casual doubt, the immediate pivot back to Stella, as if my achievement was a minor inconvenience interrupting the main story, hers. That moment solidified it. My path was mine alone. I paid for my plane ticket, moved myself into my dorm room, and navigated college life relying solely on my scholarship and money earned from multiple campus jobs. There were no tearful goodbyes or proud waves from a car. Just me, 2 suitcases, and a profound sense of being truly on my own. It hurt, but it also forged a steeliness I hadn't known I possessed. Building my own life, my own career in finance after graduation, buying my small, sunlit apartment near Green Lake. These weren't just milestones. They were declarations of independence. I wasn't living for their praise anymore. I was living for myself, and the quiet satisfaction of having built something solid on my own terms. The person who saw me, truly saw me, was my Grandpa Thomas. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't make grand pronouncements. Grandpa Thomas was a quiet man, a retired history teacher with kind eyes and a gentle laugh. He lived a couple hours away in a small red brick house filled with books and classical music. Visits were infrequent because of the distance and my parents' general disinterest in traveling, but whenever I went, Grandpa made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. He'd listen intently when I talked about school, my part-time jobs, my plans. He'd ask thoughtful questions about the books I was reading or the city I lived in. He never compared me to Stella. He just looked at me. I remember telling him about getting the Ashwood scholarship. While my parents reacted with doubt and indifference, Grandpa Thomas just squeezed my hand. "Scarlett," he said, his voice soft but firm, "you earned that. Every single bit of it. That's something no one can ever take from you. I'm prouder of you than words can say." That simple sentence, delivered with genuine warmth, carried more weight than all the empty praise heaped upon Stella combined. It was a secret treasure I held onto during lonely nights studying or navigating the complexities of the adult world on my own. He saw my effort, my resilience, my quiet strength. He saw me. Knowing his health had been failing for years didn't make the call any less devastating. My Aunt Catherine, my mom's younger sister, called. Her voice trembled. "Scarlett, honey, your grandpa's gone. He passed peacefully in his sleep last night." The world tilted. Grief, sharp and deep, hit me hard. He was the only one who consistently made me feel seen and valued, not for what I could do or be compared to someone else, but just for existing. The funeral was a blur of hushed voices, black clothing, and forced condolences. I felt like an outsider again, observing the performance of grief from my parents, Stella looking pale and subdued. I stood by his casket, tears blurring my vision, whispering a silent thank you for seeing me. I barely spoke to my parents. Brief, stilted exchanges about travel arrangements, nothing of substance, nothing of shared grief. Stella seemed distant, lost in her own world, occasionally glancing at me with an unreadable expression. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tensions, and the upcoming will reading was a quiet, looming presence everyone seemed aware of. I dreaded it not because I expected anything I truly didn't, but because I knew any mention of money, especially concerning Grandpa's estate, would inevitably bring out the worst in my parents. The week after the funeral, the family gathered at Mr. Henderson's law office for the will reading. I went purely out of obligation, bracing myself for an awkward formality. Mr. Henderson was a stoic, professional man, Grandpa's longtime attorney. He began reading, detailing assets, properties, investments. My mind drifted, assuming everything would go to my parents. Then I heard my name. All of my personal assets, including real estate, investment portfolios, and savings, Mr. Henderson read calmly, his voice cutting through the silent room, shall be divided equally among my 3 beloved grandchildren, Scarlett Harper, Stella Harper, and Robert Sterling. Silence fell like a physical weight. Stella gasped softly. Robert, my quiet cousin on my dad's side, looked up startled. My parents, Michael and Sarah, stared at Mr. Henderson, then at each other, faces a mask of disbelief. Mr. Henderson continued, unfazed, stating the total value was substantial, meaning each grandchild would receive approximately $500,000. $500,000. To me. Equal to Stella. Equal to Robert. It wasn't the money itself that stunned me, though it was an unimaginable sum. It was the equality. Grandpa Thomas, in his final act, had placed me on equal footing with Stella, challenging the entire narrative of my upbringing. In that moment, a cold dread settled in my stomach. My parents wouldn't let this stand. I knew them too well. Less than 2 hours after the reading, before I had even fully processed the shock, they were at my apartment door. There were awkward smiles, forced questions about the drive back. I made tea, my hands trembling slightly, a sense of impending doom washing over me. Michael sat on my sofa, cleared his throat, and got straight to the point, his previous pleasantries vanishing. "Scarlett," he began, "your mother and I have been talking about Grandpa's will." I waited, my jaw tight. "We think," Sarah chimed in, her voice falsely sweet, "that it would be fairer if you considered giving your share to Stella." I stared at them, dumbfounded. "Fairer?" Michael leaned forward, adopting a reasonable tone that didn't match the hard glint in his eyes. Look, Scarlett, you're doing well for yourself. You have your job, your apartment. Stella, well, she's had a rough time lately. The breakup, the bakery job is only part-time. She needs this money. You don't. I gripped my teacup. But that was Grandpa's decision. He chose to divide it equally. Sarah sighed dramatically, running a hand through her hair. If Grandpa had known Stella's situation, he surely would have wanted you to help her out. It's what family does. You're being selfish, Scarlett. Selfish? The word stung, a familiar weapon from their arsenal. Selfish. My voice was trembling now, but not from fear. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. He knew our situations. This was his wish. Not yours, not mine. Michael slammed his hand on the coffee table, making the cups rattle. Do you forget everything we did for you? Who raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head? And now you want to hoard this money while your own sister struggles. The wave of indignation was so powerful it almost choked me. Do you forget, I shot back, my voice low and fierce. Who worked since age 16? Who paid for their own books in college after the scholarship didn't cover everything? Who took out a loan for her first beat-up car while Stella got a brand new one as a graduation gift? I built this life with my hands because you always said I was the independent one who needed nothing. And now you want to use that against me. Silence hung heavy in the air. Michael took a deep breath, his face cold and set. If you keep that money, Scarlett, don't expect to ever be part of this family again. Don't expect to set foot in our house. Don't expect a dime of support from us for anything ever again. A strange, almost hysterical laugh escaped me. It held no humor. Maybe, I said, my voice quiet but clear, maybe it's time I stopped trying to. They left moments later, the air in my apartment thick with their accusations and the bitter scent of betrayal. Something inside me broke, the last fragile thread of hoping for their approval snapping completely. But amidst the pain, a quiet strength emerged. The battle wasn't over. They would not give up. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that they would fight dirty. 3 days later, their next move landed in my inbox. An email from Mr. Henderson's office. The subject line made my heart pound. Notice of executive appointment and will contest petition. The email stated that Michael Harper had been officially appointed as the executor of Grandpa Thomas's will, a contingency Grandpa had included, which I later learned was a calculated risk, and had immediately filed a petition to contest the will's distribution. The grounds? Diminished mental capacity. They were claiming Grandpa, the man whose mind was as sharp as a tack until the very end, was confused or manipulated when he made his final decisions. I felt sick. To not only try to steal my inheritance, but to also tarnish my grandfather's memory, the only person who truly believed in me, was a level of cruelty I hadn't fully anticipated. They were weaponizing his love for me against him, twisting his clear intentions into the ramblings of a confused old man, all to serve their narrative that Stella was the only one deserving. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. My first call was to Aunt Catherine. She listened, her voice filled with disbelief and anger. Diminished capacity? That's a lie. Thomas was sharp as a whip. He knew exactly what he was doing. She told me she'd talked to Grandma Eleanor, who lived nearby and had been very close to Grandpa Thomas. Grandma Eleanor was older now, and a little frail, but her eyes were still sharp and kind, much like Grandpa Thomas's had been. Aunt Catherine took me to visit her. Sitting at Grandma's kitchen table, the same table where Grandpa used to help me with my history homework, felt both comforting and heavy with anticipation. Grandma Eleanor placed a worn wooden box in front of me. "Scarlett," she said softly, her voice firm despite her age, "your grandpa foresaw this. Not maybe this exact situation, but he knew Michael's tendencies, especially with money and control. He knew Michael would not be happy if things weren't exactly as he wanted them." My eyes widened. He knew they might try something like this? He suspected, Grandma Eleanor confirmed. He loved your father in his way, but he didn't always trust him, not with important matters like this. And he saw how things were between you and Stella, how you were always expected to fend for yourself while Stella was given everything. It troubled him deeply. She opened the box. Inside were files, letters, and a small USB drive. Thomas didn't want to cause conflict while he was alive, she explained, but he wanted to ensure his wishes were honored after he was gone. He specifically instructed me, and Mr. Henderson, on what to do if anyone tried to challenge the will or claim he wasn't of sound mind. Grandma Eleanor pulled out a copy of the final will. "This," she said, pointing to a specific paragraph, "is the clause he added personally. He called it his integrity clause." I leaned closer and read the lines she indicated, my heart starting to pound with a mix of relief and burning anger at my parents' audacity. The clause was clear and absolute. Any beneficiary or appointed executor of this will who contests its validity or attempts to alter the specified distribution plan through legal or other means shall immediately forfeit their entire entitlement to any share of my estate and shall be permanently removed from any executorship role. Grandpa hadn't just anticipated their actions. He had created a legal trap. He knew naming Michael executor was a risk, but perhaps he also knew Michael's arrogance would lead him to trigger this very clause. Grandma Eleanor handed me the USB drive. "This contains an audio recording of Grandpa's final meeting with Mr. Henderson to amend the will, his written instructions to Mr. Henderson regarding this clause and the evidence, and notes from his doctor confirming his mental capacity right up to his last months." Grandpa wanted to be sure there could be no doubt. Holding the drive, the key to defending Grandpa's legacy and my own inheritance, I felt a surge of power but also a heavy responsibility. "I won't let them get away with it," I vowed. Grandma Eleanor placed her hand on mine. "I know, dear. Your grandpa knew you were the one who would stand up for what's right. He told me so." The following week felt like navigating a minefield. Michael, using his temporary authority as executor, sent emails to extended family members, painting me as greedy and manipulative. Sarah subtly hinted on the family Facebook group, which I was still in, though silently, that I was tearing the family apart over money. The flying monkeys in the family became more aggressive, sending passive-aggressive texts questioning my morals or asking if I was really sure this is what Grandpa would have wanted. I didn't respond to the texts or engage on social media. Instead, I met with Mr. Henderson. I handed him the USB drive and the documents from Grandma Eleanor. His professional demeanor returned, but his eyes held a glint of determination. "This," he said, looking at the contents of the drive, "changes everything. Mr. Harper's claim is not only unfounded, but he has unequivocally triggered the forfeiture clause by contesting the will while acting as executor. This was precisely what your grandfather intended to prevent." Mr. Henderson moved swiftly. He requested an emergency hearing with the probate court, presenting the compelling evidence of Grandpa's capacity and the existence of the integrity clause. The hearing was held in a sterile, brightly lit conference room. Present were Mr. Henderson and myself, Michael and Sarah with their lawyer, Robert Sterling, the other beneficiary, and Grandma Eleanor and Aunt Catherine there for support. Michael and Sarah entered looking confident, perhaps assuming their lawyer could easily dismiss our claims. Mr. Henderson began, calmly and methodically, presenting the evidence of Grandpa Thomas's clear mental state at the time the will was finalized. He presented the doctor's notes, the witness affidavits, and read excerpts from Grandpa's own written statement expressing his firm intention for equal distribution. Michael and Sarah's lawyer tried to object, but Mr. Henderson shut him down with facts and documentation. Then, Mr. Henderson dropped the bombshell. "Furthermore," he stated, his voice resonating in the quiet room, "Mr. Harper, while serving as executor, filed a petition contesting the validity of this will. This action directly violates Section 7, hereby referred to as the Integrity Clause, which was personally added by Mr. Thomas Harper." He read the clause aloud, every word echoing the quiet determination of my grandfather. A stunned silence fell over the room as the full weight of it hit Michael and Sarah. "Therefore," Mr. Henderson concluded, turning to the probate judge overseeing the hearing, "under the explicit terms of the deceased's will and the evidence presented, I request that Michael Harper be immediately removed from his role as executor and that he forfeit any claim he may have had to any part of the estate as per the terms of the Integrity Clause. The petition to contest the will's distribution should be dismissed with prejudice." Michael's face went ashen. Sarah stared at him in horror. Their lawyer sputtered objections, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge reviewed the documents, listened intently, and then delivered the verdict. Michael Harper was removed as executor, his petition to contest the will was dismissed, and he forfeited any potential entitlement to the estate. Justice, delivered via Grandpa Thomas's foresight and a perfectly worded clause. Michael erupted, yelling accusations of manipulation and deceit. Sarah started crying, not from sadness, but from fury and humiliation. I sat there numb. It wasn't the triumphant moment I might have expected. It was heavy sad. Winning meant irrevocably breaking the family I had always longed to belong to. But it also meant honoring Grandpa Thomas and protecting the legacy of his love and fairness. I looked at Grandma Eleanor and Aunt Catherine. They offered small, tired smiles of solidarity. In that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. A few days later, the $500,000 appeared in my bank account. Seeing the numbers there, tangible proof of Grandpa's belief in me and my successful, albeit painful, fight, was surreal. It represented security, yes, but more importantly, it was a symbol of validation I had craved my entire life. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been deliberately chosen and protected. I drove straight to Grandma Eleanor's house. When she opened the door, I just hugged her tightly, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She held me, understanding. Later, she took me upstairs to Grandpa's untouched office. It smelled faintly of old paper and pipe tobacco. On his bookshelf, nestled behind some old textbooks, was the wooden box. He kept everything, Grandma Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Every award you mentioned, every time you did something he was proud of, he noted it down or kept a little memento. She showed me a faded newspaper clipping about my middle school science fair project, a printed-out email mentioning my debate team winning a regional competition, a tiny slightly crumpled piece of paper with "Scarlett got Ashwood Scholarship" scrawled on it in his handwriting. My graduation photo from Ashwood was tucked into the front. Tears streamed down my face as I looked through the box, a lifetime of hidden pride finally revealed. He had seen me, all along. My parents' blindness wasn't the only truth. "He wanted you to have this," Grandma Eleanor said, handing me a small, sealed envelope from the box. Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandpa Thomas, dated just months before he passed. He wrote about watching me build my life, his pride in my resilience, his sadness about the family dynamics, and how the inheritance was meant to be not just financial help, but a recognition of my worth and a foundation for a future free from seeking approval. "Don't ever doubt," he wrote, his familiar script slightly shaky, "that you are enough exactly as you are. This is yours, my dear Scarlett. Use it to live the life you deserve, free and strong." Leaving Grandma Eleanor's house that evening, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter, replaced by the warmth of Grandpa's love and the quiet strength of knowing the truth. I hadn't just won an inheritance. I had reclaimed my narrative. But the drama wasn't entirely over. The family dynamic, already fractured, continued to splinter. Michael and Sarah doubled down on their smear campaign, twisting the court's decision and the forfeiture clause to portray themselves as victims of my greed and Mr. Henderson's trickery. I was removed from the family group chat, unfollowed by cousins, and received increasingly aggressive messages from relatives echoing my parents' lies. Then Stella called. Her voice was hesitant, shaky. "Scarlett? It's Stella." My heart pounded. We hadn't spoken directly about any of this. I don't know what's going on anymore," she stammered. "Mom and Dad are so angry. They're saying awful things about you." I listened cautiously. Stella sounded genuinely distressed, caught in the crossfire. She wasn't echoing the accusations. She sounded confused and scared. A few days later, she called again, sounding more distraught. "They tried to get me to sign something," she blurted out, her voice trembling. "Papers to manage my inheritance for me. To put it in Mom's account, temporarily, for tax reasons." I said no. And they got so angry. Like they were with you. They said I was being ungrateful, siding against them. This was the turning point for Stella. The manipulation wasn't just directed at the unloved child. It was a pattern of control that extended even to the favored one when money was involved. She was finally seeing the gilded cage she'd been living in. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are they doing this? Why were things always like this? Why did they Why did they treat you the way they did? In that moment, hearing the crack in her voice, I saw not the favored sister I resented for so long, but another person caught in the same toxic web, just experiencing its sting for the first time from a different angle. I spoke gently, explaining how the favoritism had always been about control, about creating a dynamic where Stella needed them completely, and I was pushed away. The inheritance and Grandpa's clause had simply exposed the ugly truth underneath. While Stella was starting her difficult journey towards understanding, my parents were facing consequences beyond just losing my inheritance. Mr. Henderson informed me that the circumstances of Michael's removal as executor and some discrepancies noted during the process had triggered a formal investigation by the relevant authorities. It seemed their attempt to manipulate the will and handle estate funds had opened a Pandora's box of scrutiny into their own financial affairs. Their greed and arrogance had truly backfired, potentially bringing legal and financial repercussions down on them. I haven't spoken to my parents since the hearing, and I don't expect to. The relationship is over. The family they prioritized above truth and fairness is fractured, perhaps beyond repair. But I have Grandma Eleanor and Aunt Catherine, my chosen family, the ones who stood by me and honored Grandpa's memory. And there's a tentative, fragile connection forming with Stella, built not on shared privilege or rivalry, but on shared trauma and a dawning understanding. The inheritance is more than money. It's freedom. Freedom from seeking approval. Freedom from the past hurts. Freedom to define my own life and my own family. Grandpa Thomas saw me when no one else did, and his quiet strength and foresight gave me the power to finally stand in the light, seen and valued on my own terms.